Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 27th Fireside Talk. And tonight we have the most special guest, I think, and I haven't said that, Melanie, about any other guest, and viewers will know that I've had on the entire series to date. And it's just a very lovely thing to do in lockdown to spend an hour with a great mind, a great life, somebody who can help lift us in these unprecedented times. It's very lovely of you to do that. So this is, if you're new to the series, warm welcome, organised by the University of Buckingham. We have on students and staff and local people, 1,000 plus, and now watching. I'll get the numbers in on this, Melanie, so you could see whether you are above the trend line. I'm sure you will be, absolutely. But let's and do have questions ready, because I'll come to the first questions first, and if they could be a brief, rather than telling us your life story, which will be fascinating, but a brief question is good, and a name is good too. And if you enjoy the series, do forward these links to everybody. They're obviously entirely free and just part of our University of Buckingham's outreach. Melanie, the great joy of having you here is that we can see you, and we can see you where you live and work, rather than seeing you on a stage. And so tell us about the room that you're in, and that Van Gogh over the fireplace too.
This is my little couple. It's a low-ceilinged, wood-panelled room in a 17th century cottage, which has never really come into the 21st century. And I have behind me is a very, very old fireplace with a sway and a salt pot. And the Van Gogh was painted by me because I desperately needed bright wood. And also over my other shoulder is a picture of a horse that I painted. But this makes me sound like a great egotist that I hang my own paintings, but it's purely because I couldn't afford to buy expensive paintings. So the T-shirt, it says feminist, and my sister gave it. This is my writing. It's a little book.
And just to check there, Melanie, if we just have our technician on, just to check the sound, Matt, that's our technician. Can we do anything more just to slightly improve Melanie's sound quality?
We can't, but it's being picked up by live captions, so that will negate the sound issues that Melanie has.
Okay, that's what we can hear you, Melanie. It just comes and goes slightly. I was going to say that I thought that was a Renoir of your left shoulder. So you obviously, have you always painted?
I was always, ever since I was little, I drew horses. The disease of horse loving that infects little girls infected me badly, and I always drew and painted horses. And periods of my life I did a bit more. So yeah, I haven't done it since I was saving it.
So Melanie and I were saying earlier that tonight's listeners, viewers, will be a mixture of those who read everything that Melanie's already or ever written and will know her life better than she knows herself, and those new to the story. But we'll just briefly at the start just tell us about, as you talk about in your memoir, what happened on Good Friday 2010.
Well, I was doing a cross-country training because I was 52 and I had decided that I wanted to play at being what I'd always wanted to do was do some the proper eventing, British eventing, and I had a horse that could do it, and I was sort of training myself up and getting ready for the season. I was dabbling at the very bottom end of the sport, and my horse just refused to jump, and I landed badly. You know, had I landed a millimeter another way, I would have broken my collarbone. But my legs flipped over my neck, and I have big, long, heavy legs, and I broke my neck at C6, C7, and I was knocked out from the neck, from the top of my the top of my armpits down, and it meant that I had to suddenly cope with the loss of everything. You know, in 2 seconds, you're a sort of happy, complacent, go-getting, can-do woman. You know, mistress of your universe, I think I put it. And then you're utterly and totally helpless. Everything was gone.
And you wrote about this with searing honesty and beauty in your memoir, The World I Fell Out Of, published by Fourth Estate, and strongly, strongly, strongly recommended to everybody listening to this. Why did you write that memoir?
It took me almost 10 years to write it.
So it published in 2019. By
yes. I started writing my column because I had this sort of visceral journalist's reaction, this need to try and express what I was going through. It's kind of like, this is a great story, you know, that I've got to tell someone about this. When I was in the MRI scanner, it was that sense of I felt like a war correspondent, front line, my own body, and writing undoubtedly saved my life when I was in hospital. Every week I was able to write down, you know, 800,000 words, and I hit send. As soon as I could use a finger to tap. In the beginning, I did it digitally. It was recorded. Then, when I came off the morphine and I was a bit more together, I could tap one finger, and so I hit send, and I was able. It was a lifeboat being able to write. Diary, and it's published. And then the much bigger thing was, after a few years passed, the much bigger thing was being able then to digest it all and to be effective, and to try and sort of write down all the stuff that I hadn't been able to express, to have a sort of absolute honesty, to try and make something, to bring it all together, and to intellectualize it, but to round the story off, and that's what I did.
And the decision to write the weekly column in the Times magazine, how did that come about?
The Times at the time had a wonderful editor called James Harding, who subsequently became head of news at
BBC.
Yeah, and now runs Tortoise. And James is a very wonderful, warm human being, and he reached out to me and he said, "Let's make this a column. We want to hear your story." And you know, it was an extraordinary thing to do, and I'm so thankful to him on a personal level. But I also think that, you know, it made the Times, you know, put them in front of disability diversity, because I'm now one of the few mainstream voices in mainstream media, and that's not easy. And it's a burden in a way, but I think it's been a great thing that my voice is heard alongside so many other, you know, happy able-bodied. So it's a great insight through humanity, really. It's humanity that makes it.
So, and your writing has inspired so many tens, hundreds of thousands of people. Now, let's just come back to the story, your life story, that you began not in Scotland, where you now are, but in Barnet. And did you imagine when you went through school and then university, starting at studying law and then switching to English, that you would become the writer that you've become? What were your thoughts at that time?
When I was little, I just wanted to have a horse. I mean, it was this sort of classic little girl in love with ponies. It was an all-consuming love affair, and I used to write stories, and I used to draw horses, and they were almost exclusively about people with horses. And I read a non-stop diet of Lee Thompson stories about, Jill enjoys her ponies. It was my sort of my secret life. My parents weren't horsey at all, but they felt like an alien. It's sad case of late development. I didn't get that. Sad. And my special training, I trained to get.
And what is, and just say a bit more about the ponies. And apologies if you'd already answered that. I just missed a bit there. Does every girl have a thing about ponies? I didn't, but I'm not a girl, and wasn't a girl.
Anthony, it's a bug that bites a lot of little girls, and it infects them for life. It's fortunately not all little girls, but very many. And once you've been bitten, you've got it. And unfortunately, I got bit bad. And well, I was still going at 52 when I led to my to a very
And so university, the switch from law to English, what did that connote there? And who were the writers who you most loved?
I got a bit bored by law. I found it a bit sort of dull and dusty and non-expressive. First year law, I was impatient, so I transferred to study literature, and my dissertation, I did my honours in Victorian literature. I loved Victorian. I loved George Eliot, Dickens. The usual big guys.
And then the decision after university, did you think that you would go off and work in a stables, or become a jockey?
My father, I once said to my father, I'd love to train as a riding instructor, and he hit the roof and he was appalled. And I mean, it was just forbidden. I had to go to university and get a proper job. So no, there was no indulging there. And when I finished at Edinburgh, I was offered 3 jobs, and one of them was as a production manageress with Lovable Bra Company, and the other was as a saleswoman for Gillette Razor Blade Company, and the third was as a trainee on the Mirror Group scheme. In fact, had I gone on it, my contemporaries would have been Alistair Campbell, which is quite funny. Right? But I was then offered Scotsman offered me an apprenticeship, and because it meant I could stay in Scotland near my boyfriend, I went to Scotland instead of going to the Mirror Group. So that's how I I mean, I had never done any journalism. I'd never done student journalism. I obviously wrote a damn good application form, and, and it took me. So I became a journalist and spent the first 2 years, my hands shaking every time I picked the phone up because I thought my bluff would be. I thought I'd be found out.
And can you see in your writing back then, your writing today, what would you want to say to yourself as a young writer?
Oh, I'd have tried to say, don't be so scared, you know, what's the worst that can happen? They can't kill you, you know, but I was always very timid. I wasn't good at doing the hard news stuff. I always felt sorry for people. When you feel sorry for them, you can't go and sort of ask tough questions. I wasn't good at conflict. So I would have said to myself, you know, be a bit kinder on yourself. And yeah, I mean, I enjoyed my career in journalism. I still enjoy it, but I was not a hard newsman.
And the Mirror up in Scotland, I mean, that was quite tough end of the market, wasn't it?
Well, I didn't. I went to the Scotsman, which was at the time, the Scotsman was the flagship, the sort of intellectual flagship of Scotland. And then it was when there were bad strikes there. That's when I threw up my reputation. I went to work for the nasty tabloids, as my father saw it, on the Sunday Mail, which was then part of the Mirror Group, and you know, working in tabloids. In fact, I think every journalist should work in tabloids because you have to learn to say in 15 words what broadsheet journalists will spend, you know, 100 words saying, and terrific discipline, tabloid journalism. So I had a lot of fun, and then I eventually rolled up. I joined the Herald, and I was part of the editing team there. I was quite senior, and I enjoyed that. And then the times came calling. I mean, you know, career-wise, I suppose everyone has regrets, and I had the opportunity to go and work in London with the Scotsman, to follow people like Jim Naughtie and Andrew Marr, to follow them in their careers onto national newspapers. I was too scared to take it when I stayed in Scotland, and so I lived with that what if. But you know, life turns out the way turns out. You make decisions, and you end up where you end up.
There's indeed that great pipeline, isn't there, of people like Jim Naughtie and Andrew Marr coming down, and you're working for Scottish newspapers, Scottish focus. Do you feel more Scottish than English?
I'm in this very strange situation where the Scots think I'm English and the English think I'm Scots, and I'm sort of a little bit of a foreigner in both countries, and I just feel British. You know, I feel I'm truly British. My mother was Northern Irish, so I'm very much. I believe everyone should get on with each other. I can't stand all this sort of breaking up with things.
And
emotionally, emotionally, I'm British.
As indeed I feel too. And then the Times coming down and great success. Tell us about that.
Well, you know, I was doing opinion columns for London, and I was doing news stuff and featurey stuff in Scotland, and I was flourishing, and you know, it all came to a rather abrupt halt. Like I say, the mistress of the universe, the world stopped spinning very suddenly, and I then developed, you know, by accident, another career, which was as reporting from the front line of my body, and I've become more famous, much more famous doing that than I would ever have been just as an ordinary journalist. Not, fame is relative. I'm not interested in fame, but my name is better known now for being the woman that broke the back in a riding accident.
And you are this role model and inspiration to so many people, including many here at this university and others listening. How tell us about writing the column. What's the process you go through? How do you decide what to write on? How do you write it?
I write I have 10 days lead time, so I write 10 days in advance, and obviously that cuts out any no chance of doing anything topical. So I have to write about myself, and it's a constant. It's just the biggest of the job is finding something fresh or something new that I can write about, some little twist, some humor, some event that is worth 800 words, when some weeks I don't do very much. So I bounce the ideas off the magazine editor, and she much prefers it when I write about me, and so I do what I'm told. She's my boss. There's other stuff I would like to write, other things to expand it a bit, but no, she likes to bring it back to me, and so I do, and I write about my family. That my husband David is wonderful. He said, he says it makes your life easier. You can write about me. You can have a bit of fun with me, and God bless him. I do. He's great, and without him as one of my characters.
Is he happy? Is Dave happy to be one of your characters?
Oh, he doesn't mind. He doesn't mind as long as I say nice things. I take the mickey out of him as kindly as I
can. And there's an early question here from Sarah, who says, has Dave's beloved pub opened yet?
You got it in one, Sarah. The beer garden opened a week last Monday, which was a celebration. He's been wearing his Arctic jacket and getting very cold, sitting outside with his mates. But I think pubs in Scotland were allowed to open today, but ours, because it's a community pub and we're renovating it, is not quite ready. So it'll be a few more days before you get inside the fire. But thank you for your thought. You will get there. You will get there.
And I've just got a message to say that there are well over 1,000 people. There are 845 different terminals clicking into you, but many have 2 and more people listening in. And thank you for bearing with. We're getting the vast majority of it. And if I don't jinx it by saying it's getting better, I won't say it's getting better, but it is. And tell us about the dog training too. What's happening?
Well, it's hard to train a dog when you're in a wheelchair because you have absolutely no physical presence.
Look, it's pretty hard training a dog even if you're not in a wheelchair.
Correct. So think how I feel. So I'm the stooge that gets ignored, and Dave is quite rough with it. He's a very nice dog. He's had a few abandonment issues, I think, because he's a rescue dog, and but he's really settled down. He's relaxing. He's getting much happier, and we'll get there. I know, and he's enjoying the freedom. I think possibly in his previous homes, which were loving homes, but he didn't have much freedom. And here we live we live way up in the Trossachs, and we have all this sort of wild land around us. So he's learning to burn off time running around, and he's coming back for biscuits. So we'll get there. He doesn't chase sheep, he doesn't chase cows. So we'll get there.
Very optimistic. Tell us about the Trossachs and why you're living where you're living, and also why there's the photograph of you. I'm sure listeners will know the photograph in the Times magazine.
Well, we lived here before my accident, and really we've now been here for almost 30 years, and it's a very special place. And we should, after my accident, we should really have sold up.
Just say that again, Melanie. Just missed that bit there. After the accident.
After the accident, we should really have sold up.
Yep.
And gone to live in sort of tarmac suburbia. But it would have been a sort of spiritual death because we love this place so much. So we decided to adapt it and to make it work. And we do. And it but it's a long way from anywhere, and you know, wheelchair access isn't great, but around us we have absolute freedom, and it's worth it for that. Yeah.
And that photograph of you in the magazine,
which nobody liked.
They are, look, everyone listening likes it.
Well, the most recent photograph was taken in the studio shop last year, and we weren't allowed to smile. Imagine being told you're not allowed to smile in a photograph. We weren't allowed to smile because the magazine was quite stylized, and you know, we were dressed up in nice glossy clothes, and we were told we mustn't smile, no count. No count when we smile, and so we look a bit sort of grim and not very much like us, really. But my editor likes the picture, that's what counts. And I long ago passed beyond my husband. My husband hates it. Every time he's in the paper, he says, I hate that photograph. I look so grim. That's the story of the studio.
And tell us about a day. Are the days similar? Is a writing day different to a non-writing day?
What I do, I try and achieve one thing every day. That's my kind of, I can't do much. I get very tired. Moving my body around is very hard work. This great big heavy, well, I'm 6 foot tall, so it's this big long appendage which doesn't move. So life when you're disabled is damn hard work. So I have the days when I write. I have the sort of 3 days a week when I'm writing for the Times. I review books. Obviously that takes time. And I do a newsletter for the pub. And that takes as much time as writing a column. And I try and allow myself a couple of days when I don't set myself too many goals, but you have to just keep push.
What's a good day feel like?
When I make my editor happy.
It's very important, your editor.
It's when I actually do something. I mean, I wrote a poem yesterday. I couldn't really help it. And it was great because I have found and only get a chance. I get that's okay. I do so.
Look, we'll just take a question there from Mel. A reminder for everybody, lots and lots of questions coming in. Mel asks, how hard was it coming back mentally and physically? You've partly addressed that, and what would you have to say to others who have had different kinds of adversity? And that will be many people looking at this.
We all handle it in our own ways, and there is no, you cannot tell anyone how they feel, how difficult it will be, or how easy it might be. Some people find it easy, other people really struggle. And all I can say is that it's what you feel that matters. It's not how other people project onto you how you should cope with stuff. It's what matters to you. And I learned that the hard way. And I think you get home and you learn. It's very scary going home with disability, especially if it's happened very abruptly in middle age. And first of all, you have to learn to feel safe at life, to feel safe in your own home again, and to come to terms with the fact that all around you are the things that you can't do that you used to do. And that's tough too, but you get there, and you just keep working at the things you can do for the sake of the people you love. And I think, for me anyway, over the last few years, I've reached a greater sense of self-awareness and self-knowledge. And you know the photographer Diane Arbus, who photographed disabled people, and she said that, if you talk to somebody who has two heads, you realize that they know something that you will never know anything about. And I think she said there's a kind of nobility in real disability, because people who have it, people who are freak show, they're aristocrats because they have been through the hard times, and they now have to exist with that knowledge and to live that life. And they may not be lovely to look at, but it's all. And I think after a few years, you begin to realize that you have a little bit of wisdom and nobility. I don't mean that in a way, but you have something which helps with madness and hectic life of able-bodied. Realize that actually there is that is
So moving. Lucy is asking, building on what you're saying there, Melanie, and again, you've touched on this, who or what was your rock and support, and your relationships with other people or groups, and how they changed? Do you still feel the same way?
when very early on in hospital, I think possibly as the morphine started to subside, that's the point at which you actually realize that it's true, that you have lost everything. And I had this, I can only describe it as a kind of epiphany. I was lying there one morning and I suddenly realized that things could have been worse, that I could have been brain damaged, I could have been dead, or I could have been injured at such a high cervical level that I would never be able to move around. I would be on oxygen respirators, and I might be housebound. And I looked at it in terms of my family, my husband and my son, and I thought um, all those things, all those three fates would have been so tough on them to cope with. One, if I was gone, then that would have been brutal, but the other two, possibly even more brutal, because they would have been tied to me in a way for the rest of their lives, especially if I had been brain damaged. And I suddenly realized, well, look, I've got a little bit of function, enough too that I can use my arms and I can lift myself around a bit, and I can sort of be a bit cheerful about what I've got. I don't need 24-hour care. If I can work hard enough, I'll get the function. I'll get my knowledge about my body's function to a point where I don't need 24-hour care, and I can go back to fulfilling some of the roles in the family and being there for them. And that sense of things could have been worse. That was my driver. That sort of positivism. Um, I I fed on that. I lived on that, and I still live on it to some extent. You know, because there are dark periods when you do go and cry and you question everything. But um, I'm still here and I'm still supporting people I love, and they need my support. So it's, in that sense, it's good. It's good.
So love is at the heart of the transformation and the sense of making life worthwhile. A question there about the epiphany. Where did the epiphany come from?
Well, I was just lying in bed, and I was just lying there thinking, this is so terrible. This is so terrible. I can't go on. I can't go on. I can't go on as a paralyzed person. The enormity of it, and it was just this kind of, hey, things
Yeah.
could have been worse. Um, it did feel a bit like a sort of a thunderbolt. Um,
And James asks Melanie whether people treat you differently, and is there a way that's better for people to treat you?
What I would say is that when I meet people who I didn't know before, I kind of want to tap myself on the chest and say to them, you don't know the real me. The real me is 6 foot tall and would be talking to you eyeball to eyeball. And I feel that I'm a different person because I've lost my physical powers, and I've lost that sort of spontaneity and the ability to move so intrinsic to a human being. Is what you are. And I lost I lost my big long leg to help me stride away from boring conversations. And I have been made passive, and I have to some extent been disempowered by the accident. I've been empowered in a way, writing my voice, but in sort of in my own personal life, I feel balance power sway from me, and I'm not quite the bouncy candy person I was, and I mourn that. I mourn it greatly. But as you say, the reflective person kind of chugs along in the background at the height of, I, the reflective person is down here saying, steady on, you're still here, come on, girl, get it together, keep going. And that's how I plod along. And I was going to say that me, optimism has been a tool because I used it to help me overcome. We said, well, I have to be losing for the sake of love. It's love
Did you always have such expressive eyes, because you talk with your eyes a lot?
You know, it's a funny thing, Anthony. I used to be very scared and nervous about doing it. I didn't become a broadcast journalist. I was nervous. My sort of brain-mouth connection dried up. I wasn't confident. And since this has happened to me, that sort of shyness, that lack of confidence is gone, because it's that sense of, well, worst thing has happened. And now also know I have a story to tell. So I can talk. I've got something to talk about. I don't feel that I'm bluffing it.
So,
That has allowed me to be able to do book festivals, and I've done some radio work too, since my accident, and I feel quite liberated. I'm not scared anymore by broadcasting, and maybe that's why you think my eyes are sparkling. And it's very kind of you to say that, by the way.
well, obvious thing to say. Here's another Sarah saying that you're an intrepid traveller. Favorite holiday destinations?
Well, I love to go to France to see I have a lot of family in France, and I love my sister and her family, and I love to go and see them. My niece lives in the Pays Basque, and I love to go to the Outer Hebrides, which are wonderful, and
Harris and Lewis.
Harris and Lewis and Lewis. Harris is the most beautiful one.
Is it? You recommend Harris above as the top Hebridean island?
It's the most dramatic. It's the one with all the big mountains, and yeah, the sound of Harris on a good day, there's nothing to beat it. The Caribbean, Luskintar Bay, the Caribbean has nothing.
And what is it about France, apart from family and friends, that is so special?
It's family really. I love open spaces and I love unspoiled spaces. I'm not a city person at all, and I think the Pyrenees are lovely.
Mm.
But then France is just, there's just rural France, because there's not so many people. I like that.
It's very special. Now, Margaret asked you, my husband is stepfather to my son, and I loved your article about the effects of lockdown on their relationship. So that's really a comment, and asked about how you're weathering things. So lots of comments about your different articles. Laura says, what's your relationship like with horses? Of course, some of these people who are writing in questions will themselves have a handicap, but they're not indicating. Have you been able to reconcile yourself with horses? What's your relationship with horses now?
Well, I went back to horses because it was like the boyfriend that's been cruel to you. You're drawn back to them. And I still loved horses, and so I went to riding for disabled. As soon as I could hold myself upright. When I was in hospital, I got an email from the head of riding for disabled saying, "Come and we'll see if we can make it happen." And so I went back to it, riding a disabled horse. You know what I mean? Riding a mare, and I loved it, and it was such good physiotherapy for me. I was coming on in leaps and bounds. I could sit upright. I could even put my arms out in front of me and twist my waist. I gained so much muscle power because the physiotherapy you get from horses action is great. Cerebral palsy, so many things. Anyway, I got to the point where I was doing dressage. Like watching paint dry. It's only walking. but I was doing it, and I filled me with enormous joy and empowerment. I felt like the old me, and then I was deeply, deeply unlucky because the horse got a fright. Well, I write about it in the book. You know, horses do what horses do, and they're creatures of flight. And the horse took off, and I flew through the air, and I landed in the riding arena, and I pushed myself up onto my one elbow, and I said, "Well, my neck's not broken," and I drove myself home. But fortunately, late that night, in the hit back in A&E with trying to tell the consultants that, yes, I was tetraplegic from falling. Yes, I practiced. Yes, and you, I was really, really bad. I felt, and I felt Ollie, and I also family again. How much pain I stepped back by. So I have will still. I love to see on Twitter. I follow stuff. So it's love affair. Rather cruelly, I think I really do think that was
Adam says, thank you very much, Melanie, for a very moving talk. I had a similar accident on a horse, and I thought my life was over and I wanted to die because I couldn't see any way of coping. So hearing your talk is amazing. So that's from Adam. Paul asked about when you talked about regrets, perhaps you've covered this. What advice would you give people, and what advice about taking risks?
First of all, Adam, you'll get there. It's okay. There's good things. You will find compensations. It's hard, but you'll get there. Do it for other people, even if you can't do it for yourself. My attitude to risk is that if we don't take risks, then we don't live. I could have had my accident crossing a supermarket shop. I could have tripped on a curb and broken it. I did it doing a fairly dangerous sport, that's for sure. But I took all the safety precautions, but I did take a risk. I took an informed risk. I would suggest that we should never stop taking risks and enjoying sport and relishing our bodies. But I would, for instance, I would say to anybody doing jumping now to wear an air jacket to protect their necks and their spines. So, you know, be sensible about it, but please keep living, keep doing things, because that's what makes us as human beings. We can't exist just being cotton wool. You know, risk and sport are essential.
Yes, well, as a former head teacher, I would absolutely have that same opinion, Melanie, that we do more of a disservice by wrapping our young people and not taking risks than exposing them. Lee has a specific question. Melanie, how do we get in touch with Riding for the Disabled?
Well, if you I would Google it. The thing to understand is that Riding for the Disabled, they have an umbrella organization, but it's run locally by independent organizations. It's not centrally funded and run. So if you contact Riding for Disabled, they will tell you who the local places are. But if you Google your local places, you may find them by yourself. Yeah, it's and make an approach that way. There are other disabled riding places that are not affiliated to Riding for Disabled. Also do great.
And there we are. Good. Riding for Disabled. Thank you for putting that up on the screen. And Chris here says, Melanie, Chris says, I read you every week, but had no full idea what an absolute gem you are, or what a stunningly beautiful personality and person you have. I do wish the Times would put a picture of you as you are tonight. A comment there for Chris.
Chris, you are a silver-tongued devil. Thank you very much. Would you please write to my editor, Nicola Gill, at the magazine?
I know, Chris, and you managed to get him absolutely spot on there. Scott is mesmerized by your painting over your shoulders and said, have you always been this good at art? Do you ever think about selling some of your works? There you are. Give him a price now.
Oh dear. Oh, I think it's worth about £2 bob. Yeah. The price of the frame, about 50 quid. Oh no, this is just sheer flattery. They're just trying to make me feel good, which is very sweet of them. I appreciate it.
There you are. Jen is asking, looking back, if you could change it, knowing what happened, would you still have chosen to ride the horse?
No, well, no. I would have done things differently. I should have stopped the jumping, the heavy duty stuff before I did, and just stuck to dressage. So no, of course I have regrets in that regard. I wouldn't have done what I did. But you know, hindsight is a wonderful thing. You crack on in life, and you reap the whirlwind. You know, sometimes life just jumps out and bites you in the bum, and you know, it could have been a car accident, it could have been a rail accident. It's random. It's random.
A question from somebody here called Lovey. Has your Scottish humour helped you more than anything, and has it changed? And this person is very captivated by your humour and your particular brand of humour there, Melanie.
Pitch black humour is the stuff of extreme disability. If you can imagine a unit full of about 60 people who've broken their backs, sitting around together in wheelchairs, chewing on their fate together. There you have the absolute definition of black humour. And I must confess, I had a pretty off sense of humour anyway, and my husband Dave certainly does. So I mean, I did have a good sense of ridiculous. But when you're in that kind of situation, you just realize it is the biggest life craft available, and you use it, time on it, and I did, and it helped.
And just the last question, are you optimistic? Where does your optimism come from, and how come you're so radiating life?
Well, if you caught me in another part of the day, I'd be sitting crying in my bathroom. You know, you rise to the occasion. I put on a public-facing face. I try and be cheerful. I try and lift people. If I was down and gloomy all the time, I would bring people down. So I try and be upbeat. Where does my optimism come from? I don't know. I guess I think you're born with a certain amount of optimism, and I had a rather negative father, and I think that made me a bit headstrong and a bit impulsive, and it also made me very positive.
So that's a happy irony here. And look, the University of Buckingham is presenting you. This is a twist on Desert Island Disc. Is presenting you with an evening that you could have with your favourite author, alive or dead. Who would you go for? Would it be one of your Victorian authors?
Oh, you know, I'm really.
This is just both of you. Dave is not invited. It's just you and him over a candlelit dinner.
Oh, good. Well, I think it would be. Only one person.
Go on.
Well, I would love to have spent time with Lionel Shriver. I would love to dine out with Lionel Shriver, because I think she's her last book about sport is great. I would like to get to know her, and I would George Eliot, and I think that's enough, really.
That's certainly enough. And to
Anthony, that was the name, Anthony Beevor. I'd lost the name for a minute. I would love to spend time too with Anthony Beevor, because I think he is a wonderful writer.
That's the one of the three authors who is a male. And your favourite Eliot?
Oh, Middlemarch. Yeah.
Okay, Middlemarch. And lastly, we're going to present you with any painting from any art gallery in the world to thank you, Melanie, for tonight, paid for by the University of Buckingham, where I'm leaving in 3 months, so that's going to be fine. What are we going to? I'm sure my successor is watching. Sorry, James. What painting are we going to present you with?
I would like a Velasquez. The one, I don't know the name of it. It's the one where there are the people in the room and you can see through to the other room behind. You know the one I mean?
Yes.
And strange things happening in the corners. And you could spend a whole lifetime looking at it, seeing something different, strange about it.
Okay.
Absolutely. You sprung that top of the head at me, and that's the only thing I can think of.
No, I think that's a wonderful choice. So look out on Saturday morning, and you'll see the red postie van driving up, and but pretend it's a surprise when it arrives.
Brilliant.
Melanie, thank you for your wonderful humour, dark, light, and all colours, and your wonderful insight and encouragement and heart. And magnetic personality and vivacity. Thank you from all of us. It's been an absolute joy. Melanie Reid, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.